Good morning, everyone. My name is Daniel Torrez, and I will be facilitating today's coffee and conversation. And I do have a coffee. I have a Starbucks caramel macchiato, actually. Again, I'd like to thank Sarah, the founder of The Power of Our Story, for allowing this platform to reach many, many people, especially those in the protection or protectors field. And today we'll be discussing and talking about mental health, not only in the first responder, military veteran arena, but in general. Be discussing this with my lovely wife, Melissa Torrez. So I'm going to read her bio so we can get started. Melissa Torrez is the owner and director of the Silverleaf Counseling and Consulting, LLC, right here in sunny Phoenix, Arizona. In her private practice, Melissa seeks to support individuals struggling with past trauma, anxiety, depression, and/or other issues of concern by guiding them toward positive change. Her specialties include trauma and PTSD, anxiety, depression, dissociative disorders, impulse control disorders, mood and personality disorders. Melissa is a military veteran. She served as a military police officer in the Army for 5 years and has experience working with first responders and military families. She is trained in cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT, eye movement desensitization, hard word, and reprocessing, EMDR, motivational interviewing, mindfulness, and the Neurosequential model of Therapeutics, another hard word, NMT. Melissa earned her master's degree in counseling from Webster University, her bachelor's degree in psychology from Arizona State University, go Sun Devils. She is a certified first responder counselor, CFRC, through Academy Hour, and is currently in a doctorate program to receive her PhD in clinical sexology. She is registered with the State of Arizona Board of Behavioral Health Examiners as a licensed professional counselor / supervisor. So that was a mouthful. I know quite a bit about this nice lady. So let's jump right in. So we just read your bio. People have seen it online. And other than what is in your bio, is there anything else you want to share about your life experiences, education, or training that you feel would be relevant to our discussion today on mental health?
So there are some things, I mean, with everybody, right? We all have life experiences, good, not so good, and bad. So I was raised by drug addicts. I know that is not the politically correct term to use for people that are substance abusers. But I don't want anybody to discount what I went through. So I coined them drug addicts because that's what they are to me. I would never call any of my clients a drug addict. They are all substance abusers. But with my parents, it's a special relationship that I have with them. So dealing with that, I was raised by my biological mother and my stepfather. I never met my bio dad. Recently, I've reached out to some people with his name and kind of fit that criteria, but I haven't had a response back yet. So I think that ship has sailed and I've moved on from that. It is what it is. I had my first child at the age of 15 with my first husband, not my husband yet. My second child at the age of 18. And then I got married for the first time at the age of 20. I got married at the age of 20 because I wanted to join the military. At the time I wanted to join, they told me because I had children that I either had to relinquish custody or get married. I wasn't going to relinquish custody of my children. So because if I relinquished custody, then I would have no benefits for them when I joined the military. And that was the big factor in joining the military. So I got married. Marriage didn't work out. He was abusive, but since that's what I grew up in, it was kind of the normalcy. When I got shipped over to Korea, I kind of made the decision, how can I be a military police officer and enforce laws and do all that good stuff when at my house I'm being beat up on? So I really can't be any type of role model for any women or men I come in contact that have experienced DV if I'm going through the same thing at home. So when I was in Korea, of course, I met Daniel in Korea, but I also decided to go through JAG and send divorce papers to my current husband. I kind of took the coward way out and it kind of did it from afar, but I thought if I did it in person, it would have never went through because I didn't have the strength to be able to do that in person. So after I left Korea, I got pregnant by Daniel. Divorce hadn't gone through yet, so there's kind of some overlap in marriages and all that great stuff. Got out of the military and then kind of didn't know what I wanted to do. So I did some administrative work. There was a little bit of time, there was like a gap in between Daniel and I's relationship because I was back home in Connecticut pregnant and then he was still in the military. So he was doing what he needed to do. And then after I had the baby, maybe about a year or so afterwards, we kind of linked up again. And then eventually I moved down to be with him. We got married in Vegas, all that great stuff. After being in Phoenix, Arizona, doing some administrative work for a couple of years, we had a break in our relationship. I call it a sabbatical. We were, away from each other for about 8 months. And then about a month or maybe a couple of weeks before the divorce was final, we decided to work it out. So we got back together. I came back to Phoenix and then I decided to go to school. I said, I don't want to be put in the same position of me moving around and being without stuff. I have 3 children. I have to be able to support them. So that's when I decided to go back to school. I went to community college because I was not the best high school student. So I didn't know how well I was going to do in college. So I took it really slow. Because you have to take like math and English tests to see where they can put you. So I did well in the English test, and for the math test, I didn't do so well. So I had to take the math before you could take the math to count. And then I ended up having to take that math class twice. So it was a really rocky start. But after that, I kind of, got into the swing of things and then took a couple of psychology classes. And I was like, this is really interesting. And I was really good at it. And then from there, I got my associate's degree with special requirements in psychology. They don't do that anymore. So you know how old school my degree is. And then I got into Arizona State University for their bachelor's in psychology program. Completed that in 2 years, graduated summa cum laude, all that great stuff. The running joke about a bachelor's in psychology is you really can't do anything with it. So you kind of have to get your master's degree and go further if you want to utilize your degree. So I applied for the Master's of Social Work program, got into the Master's of Social Work program with a fellowship because I did so well in my undergrad. They actually paid me to go to the MSW program. After a year being in the MSW program, I didn't really do so well. Well, it's not that I didn't do well. I did well academically. Social work really wasn't my thing. It's a lot of hand-holding, I feel, with social work, and that's just not what I wanted to do. It's funny, the story. Anyway, so after leaving that program, Daniel was stationed at Fort Bliss, Texas. So I uprooted the family from Phoenix. We went to El Paso. I said, you know what? I really want to do nursing. So I applied for the nursing program at the University of Texas, El Paso, UTEP. They said, well, you have to take all these prerequisites and then you can apply for the nursing program. So I took a year of prerequisites. I applied to the nursing program and they denied me. So I was like, that's great. I did a year of school. That means nothing. So I said, well, what can I do now? I don't want to do nursing. I kind of got, derailed and a bad taste in my mouth. I said, well, let me do counseling. So I applied for the Master's of Arts program for community counseling at Webster University. They accepted me and I completed my MA with them. I've done a lot of school, some of it for no reason. But I mean, it's always great to get educated on some things. After that, the way I did my master's program is I took extra classes. In the state of Texas, if you take certain classes, you can be licensed for different things. So if I were to still be in Texas, I would be licensed for a licensed professional counselor, a licensed marriage and family therapist, and then an LCDC, which is a licensed chemical dependency counselor. Unfortunately, or not unfortunately, we didn't stay in El Paso. We moved to California. So in California, their licensing requirements are totally different. Their nomenclatures are totally different. They didn't really recognize the LPC. So I got a job as a social worker. So I did social work for 2.5 years. I worked with foster family agencies. I worked with CPS for Contra Costa County for a very short time. And then I went to a mental health agency, which provided mental health services in the schools through the MHSA grant. I don't know what that stands for. It's basically they get money from the 1%ers to help fund their mental health programs in the state of California. It's a really great program. And then, trying to gain hours for licensure there. And then we moved back to Phoenix. So I was finally able to gain all my hours for my licensure, worked for a community health agency here for 2.5 years, doing NMT stuff, which is the Neurosequential model of Therapeutics. And we'll discuss that a little bit later. And I mean, it was a great experience, a lot of what not to do's, when you're doing stuff. Community mental health isn't the most ethical place to work for, unfortunately. You would expect working with fellow mental health professionals, everybody would be warm and fuzzy and nice to you. And unfortunately, that wasn't my experience. So that's when I decided to leave and join my own private practice. So for training, I've had a lot of training. I'm trained in CBT for anxiety. I'm certified in that. I'm not certified. So EMDR has different levels of certification. So I am EMDR trained. So that's the first level. And then there's EMDR certified, which means you get special certification regarding the hours that you're doing EMDR with people, and then supervision for those hours. And then there is, I think it's called the EMDR consultant, where you can actually provide the training for each and then be the supervisor. I'm also trained in the Neurosequential model of Therapeutics. It's not a therapy, it's an assessment. What we do is we actually do brain mapping on people that have experienced trauma and neglect. So that way we can gauge what recommendations would be more beneficial to them. For example, if I have a 14-year-old child who's experienced severe neglect and abuse, they're not going to be able to chronologically function at their age. They're going to be developmentally younger. So if I were to go in a session and want to do talk therapy with that 14-year-old, it's going to be a waste of everybody's time involved. That you're going to have to do more of a developmental approach with them. A lot of times, not a lot of times, but sometimes that 14-year-old may need to go all the way back and start off with some sort of play therapy. If the 14-year-old is, a regular 14-year-old and is like, I don't want to do play therapy, you kind of have to, I don't really want to use this word, but it's what it is, manipulate the situation and kind of use different words for it, or kind of go a roundabout, because you don't want to make them feel like, oh, we have to do this, type of therapy that we would do for a 5-year-old because you're not you're not this. Yeah, there's some mandatory trainings that you have to have for your licensure. And then there's, your extra curriculars, I guess, whatever ones that interest you or you think would benefit, your practice. I'm currently in a PhD program for, hopefully I'll get my doctorate in clinical sexology. So I'll be a sex therapist in a couple of years, which is, always fun to talk about with people, especially adolescent teens. You're muted, dear.
Speaking of that, can you share? So you're an LPC, licensed professional counselor here in the state of Arizona. We know that Terry is going to test to be nationally certified as a coach. What other type of mental health professionals out there that somebody could seek for support?
Absolutely. And I did mention some of them earlier. So with your LPC, you have, in order to get your independent license, you have to have your associate license first. So you have to be a licensed associate counselor. You have to, in order to get your LPC, you have to gain 32 hours of direct and indirect service, and then have 100 hours of supervision. And then depending on the state, go ahead.
Is that 3,200?
What did I say, 1,000?
No, you said 32.
Oh, 32. I thought I said 3,200. Sorry.
No, that's okay. That's
Thank
why
you.
I'm here.
Yes, 3,200. I mean, I wish it was
Big
32,
difference.
but it's 32. And then it depends on like I said, it depends on the state, because in Arizona, you need 3,200. It was, I think, 1,600 direct, and then the rest indirect. And indirect is training, supervisions, all that great stuff. But in the state of California, you only need 3,000. So you're like, oh, cool. You need 200 hours less, but you need 1,750 direct, and direct hours are harder to get. Indirect hours are easy. You just take some trainings and do some other stuff. And that's the licensed professional counselor. And then you have the social work side. So if you're looking to be a clinical social worker, they have to take 2 tests. So they'll have to test to become a licensed Masters of Social Work person. And then after they gather all their hours, they have to test again, and then they can get their licensed clinical social worker designation. And then the state of Arizona has substance abuse counselors as well. And it's different than Texas. And I'm not exactly sure what they are for California. I never looked into it. But for substance abuse, there's 3 levels of certification, and it depends on your education level. So there's an LASAC, which is a licensed associate. Again, need to get your hours. Substance abuse counselor. And then there's the LISAC, which is LISAC, and that's the independent counselor. And then there's the marriage and family therapist. So for the associate, again, it's the LAMFT, and then just for the licensed marriage and family, it's LMFT. There's a lot of acronyms. I thought there was a lot of acronyms in military and law enforcement, but there's so many different acronyms, and they mean different things depending on what world you travel in. So for Arizona, they have the Arizona Board of Behavioral Health Examiners. So all the licenses that I just mentioned, you can search somebody out to see if they have any disciplinary actions, or how long they've actually had their license, or if they actually have a license. Because they're, people are people. So you may just want to, check your state board. I'm not exactly sure what they have in Canada in regards to that. I'm sure it's something similar. From what I hear, Canada is a little bit ahead of us in regards to some programs and stuff. So, and then we have psychologists, of course. That's a separate board website. So we have the Arizona Board of Psychologist Examiners. And then for psychiatrists, they're medical doctors. So the medical board is what you would have to look at for that. I know for every psychiatrist that I've met, only prescribes medication. I've never found anybody that I've come in contact with that have done therapy sessions. They're just medication providers. So, and we do have, I don't know exactly what I think they're nurse practitioners who can prescribe medications. So we do have those. So there's a couple places that I refer to if somebody's interested in medication.
Excellent, great. And just real quick in the chat, Terry said for Massachusetts, it's a 38 credit master's with 700 hours before taking the exam for licensure for a therapist.
700 total hours or direct?
I probably direct, but
Okay.
yeah, they actually changed it to a 38 credit master's instead of a 30 credit master's. I had looked into it because had I known I was going to retire 14 months early, and I'm like, if I come back and finish up, no, you have to start your master's all over again.
Okay. And the state requirements for the master's degrees are different too. In Texas, I was 48 semester hours. I did extra so I could be, I may as well, I'm in there anyway, and it's just one extra class for the extra licensure requirements. In the state of California, it's 60. I had to actually take a class in order to get licensed. It was psychopharmacology, so it was a really good class anyway. And then Arizona, I think it depends. I think it's 60, but if it's KCREP, which is an accreditation for counseling programs, I think it differs, but I'm not sure.
Absolutely. And I know you mentioned the different boards of examiners that people can look up individuals that they may be interested in, but with so many different types of helping professionals and the different types of therapies or therapy modalities. Well, I know we mentioned earlier psychology today, but how would someone who's wanting to seek support and maybe a little apprehensive, maybe what would be a good start for them to look to find out information about the different types of helping professionals as well as the different therapies?
So I would just do a Google search, because Google can be awesome at times, depending on what you put in the, what you're researching. And then, I mean, if you talk to friends, if you talk to family members, if you're able to do that, or you have a support system, even reaching out to them or just asking, hey, do you know anybody that does this? I'm looking to, talk to a therapist. Or you can even say, hey, my friend's looking to talk to a therapist. Do you have anybody that you recommend? I mean, there's different ways that you can go around, asking for stuff.
Absolutely. Google is your friend. And I have shared, with different people, I believe on here, that I've finally sought support from a mental health professional after 30 plus years of compartmentalizing. And that's what I did. So I'm retired military, so I have TRICARE. So I went to the TRICARE website, looked under the provider list, and then I bounced that off of going to Psychology Today and some of these other websites to find out information. And I found great information. I found a licensed clinical social worker who has experience with military and first responders. And so far, my relationship is great. And I'm definitely glad that I finally sought that help. But also here, real quick in the chat, Brianne is saying great info. They're in California. I think after her, and I hope you don't mind me sharing your chat, Brianne.
Not at all. Go ahead.
Okay, great. Looks like her husband, when he leaves law enforcement, is looking to go into psychology because he has a passion for, especially after seeing all that she's gone through and continue to grow through, wants to work with first responders. So she says, thank you, great information. And Scott also says, finding the right relationship matters in that regard. Absolutely. And again, there's so much on the interweb that we can look up people. And again, word of mouth, I've learned with first responders and military and veterans is a big thing. Because if you have somebody, let's say a firefighter who goes and has a bad experience, somebody asks them, they're like, yeah, don't go to this one. And I think it goes the same way with therapists about clients. Yes, no. Although I don't think therapists really share about their clients. They're not supposed to.
We can't, so.
Right.
But
But
I
I'm
do
sure it
wanna,
happens.
I
Come
do
on
wanna
now.
hit on, I do wanna hit on two things that you had mentioned. And
Great.
then Paul's hand is raised. But with your insurance, when you go and look for providers on your insurance, even though the providers are listed on your insurance, you still need to ask the provider when you call and make the appointment if they take your insurance, because they may have decided not to stay with that insurance anymore. But insurance is a little slow to keep up with lists. So you may want to check that so you don't get stuck with a private pay bill. And then in regards to the relationship with your therapist, if you go into a therapist's office and you don't feel comfortable during the first session, don't ever force yourself to go back. You don't have to go back. You should know within that first 5 minutes if that therapist is going to be a good fit for you, or maybe even a decent fit. And you may want to go the second time to see if your, spidey senses were correct. And if your spidey senses were correct, then you just need to walk away from it. The therapist is there for you. You're not there for the therapist. So you run the show. Don't ever let anybody tell you different. That includes therapists, that includes coaches, that includes doctors, psychiatrists, psychologists, you name it. They're there for you.
Absolutely. Janet, I hope you don't mind me sharing. Janet shared that her first psychologist was someone that she would not pay anyone else to go to. So I know there's times, and Terry says that she, again, hope you don't mind, the counselor she sees specializes first responders, and is definitely a huge difference. And that's what, is great about doing your own research. And we have to take our own health and our own mental health to heart. And if we want to seek that support and get that help, then it's up to us to make sure that we find that right relationship. And I did exactly what Melissa said. I went to the TRICARE provider. I got a list of names. Then I would go to their website, and some of them had said on their website, no longer accepting TRICARE or no longer accepting new clients. Okay, so I scratched them off the list, narrowed that list down, went to my first one and saw that. So we've shared a lot of information. Real quick, for Melissa, have you ever experienced any unusual or weird events that you can share during a counseling session?
Do you want to do hands up first? There's two people with their hands up.
Yeah, we'll do hands up. I'm good with that.
Okay.
Mr. Paul?
In California, anybody who is a licensed to provide professional services is required to display that license on the wall where it's visibly available to the public. It's not hanging the license in a broom closet. This is not where it can be seen.
Or in a folder.
However, if that license has been suspended, not revoked, but suspended, you still need to check. The only time the license disappears is when it's been revoked. And so for whatever it's worth, that's the way California operates. I can't speak for the rest of the states. I just simply don't know.
Yes, and I believe that Scott said it has to be conspicuously displayed, right? So you can actually see it, it's visible. And I think it's the same for Arizona, no, Melissa?
I'm not sure about Arizona, but I was in California, so mine is placed in my office. I know for California though, because I worked so I had a main office and then I went out to work for different schools. So if you do that, it has to be placed in your office. Like you don't have to travel to the different, schools that you go to as long as it's placed. And yeah, it has to be hung for all to see.
Absolutely. All right, Brianne?
I just wanted to touch on the therapist thing, just having my own experience on it. And really appreciate you bringing up that if it doesn't work, don't force it. My husband and I did some intensive therapy. We were on the verge of getting a divorce, but we were committed to, seeing if we could make it work. And here we are 20 years later. But my point being is that we went through 3 counselors before we found the one who worked for us. And she actually was someone who works primarily with law enforcement. Now, for me personally, I'm out here in California because I don't know what other states it's in, but Kaiser is our provider. Now, Kaiser, that could be a whole nother story. However, I have found that, and I'm sure this is true of other medical professionals, but one of the things that I've made a point of doing, whether it's a medical physician, but especially for mental health, is I Google them, I research them, and I look for keywords of what things that I know will not work with me. And I found an incredible psychiatrist who is prior military, who, and she doesn't really put that out there, but she is prior military and works with first responders, and she's the most open-minded person. And I've gone through quite a few psychologists and psychiatrists in Kaiser, and is a perfect fit for us, or well, for me. So, and the last thing I just want to mention, because I think it's worth mentioning, is here, my husband's department has an EAP program, employee assistance program. I just want to say that when people hear that, in my experience, they're like, no, because the department is involved. Let me tell you that we utilized EAP, my husband and I, for our counseling, and we went 2 years to therapy without paying a dime. And we were assigned a number, and the department never knew who we were. And what you need to do is, when you speak to that therapist, make sure you get the full story from them of how they talk to your department to keep your privacy. So I would just really encourage anyone who has EAP available to see what your requirements are to use it. But it is helpful. It saves you on money, and you'll likely find somebody who is a really good fit. So that's just my point and pitch on EAP. It saved my marriage.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. And with that, Melissa, can you touch on the EAP insurance difference, if there's any, that you've experienced?
The only difference for EAP is they pay the therapist not as much as your regular insurance. So there's some therapists that will not take an EAP.
And that's a shame. And nothing against therapists. I happen to know one that's pretty good. But some of them are maybe not in it for the right reason all the time. But with EAPs, because I think with our EAP with the state agency, I think we're given 12 sessions for free. And then if something is needed after that, maybe an additional 6, so maybe 18 total. Have you experienced any difference in timeframes or number of sessions with any EAP clients?
Absolutely. So they can range from whatever. I've had the smallest is 3. The most right now for me that I've had is 8. But some of the EAPs are for each issue. So if you go in with one issue and utilize the 8, and then do another issue and get authorization for that one, you can do another 8. So there's really not much gap. And then the issues flow together anyway. So, and the EAP doesn't need to know any diagnostic codes or anything like that. They just need to know when you met for session and if it was telehealth. And if there's any
one thing we did.
Yeah. So
Actually,
yeah,
and,
you can totally, you can go for a couple of years and still use your EAP because it works off of different issues, but it depends.
yeah.
It depends on your insurance.
Yeah, and Michelle,
Absolutely. And again, we are Kaiser patients, so each situation is obviously different, but there
Mhm.
wasn't a provider within our insurance, so that's the route we went.
yeah, and Michelle chimed in the chat that her department allows EAP 6 sessions.
Okay.
All right, very good. Janet?
Yeah, I just wanted to say thanks so much for saying that, the Spidey sense, because that is so important. Even I do some life coaching after trauma, not during trauma goes to somebody specialized in that, but there's nothing really after trauma to keep someone moving forward. And that's what I found when I finished. But I always say, if you're not comfortable with somebody, walk away. And the first psychologist I had, like, it was, yeah, nothing at all. The second one, she was friggin' amazing. But I did not go through our RCMP psychologist. I had been in a car accident, so I thought it was something else. And so it was somebody else that diagnosed me with PTSD. But I know that the people that did go through our psychologists through the RCMP, that it did get reported and they could pull the files. And there was a lot of stuff that happened because of that. And so I was very blessed that I went with my own instincts. So yeah, definitely, even at any presentation I get, never ever work with someone you do not feel comfortable with. So thank you so much for bringing that up.
Excellent. Miss Sarah?
Melissa, first off, I just want to say I think it's amazing, your journey. So good for you. I mean, you've really come a long way, and really advocated for yourself and got yourself educated so you can help other people with all those different degrees and licenses. And so anyway, just want to celebrate you for a second. And the other thing, do you feel comfortable sharing more about what you could kind of alluded to about the ethics in mental health, or lack of ethics in mental health? I'm actually really interested because I've had my own experiences in the counseling side that was a little disturbing, because I never had that heads up and I was confused and I had these expectations. And so I'm just very curious on your take, if you feel comfortable.
I can share some stuff. I can't throw people under the bus, but with community mental health, it's all about producing. So money is a big factor in community mental health. So I think a lot of the things that I had an issue with working in community mental health is you had to see a certain amount of clients in a day in order to make your productivity. So your productivity is the dollar amount that you have to make in a day. So if you don't, and then the productivity is a monthly total. So if you don't make your productivity, it goes from daily to weekly to monthly basis, then you as a clinician are going to be reprimanded because you're not making enough money for the company. The productivity went up in the pandemic. During the pandemic, I had, everybody's going through a lot of unknowns. So I was a supervisor at the time. I'm not telling my staff that their productivity is going to be raised. You do what you feel you need to do. But with that being said, I was in a very specialized place. Not many people are certified in NMT. And that was our focus. We had an NMT team. So they really would have been at a disadvantage to let anybody on that team go. So I didn't really have any qualms about, telling my staff that we don't need to worry about productivity. You need to take care of your family and what's going on in the world right now. So I think that's more of the ethical thing. In community mental health, there's a lot of people just coming out of their graduate program. And that's how you gain your experience and your hours for licensure. Some people shouldn't be supervisors in regards to that because they're supervising those those clinicians. So there's a lot of things happening that shouldn't be happening. Yeah, and I couldn't stand behind that or be a part of that anymore. So I think that was one of my motivating factors to go into private practice, unfortunately.
Yeah, that's interesting. Thank you.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and nobody knows it unless they're in it. And when you're in it, you're like, what the F?
Yeah.
All right.
I have thought that a few times. Yeah. So and yeah.
Why the face, man? Why the face? I got a random side question from Lynette. What is histrionic disorder? If you're familiar with that, not to put you on the spot, but we're
No,
all
that's-
friends here.
So I don't know the specific definition. So, but my understanding of histrionic disorder, not to be derogatory in any type of way, it's like an overglorified drama queen who's like dramatic over everything, and that's histrionic. Never
And
had
above-
anybody with that, or I've never diagnosed anybody with that, but it would be interesting to see.
We've also got another one about dissociation.
What about dissociation?
Can you just like skim the top on what dissociate? Oh, there's Brianne. I'll let Brianne ask the question.
Yeah, I just wanted, it was thrown out to me in a session, when trying to recall certain incidents or even things that happened a couple of days ago. I have no recollection of
Mhm.
it, or I get into these periods where I'm being pushed to my limit, and I start to go into like this fight or flight. And so that word has been thrown out to me a few times, but I'd like to hear more about it, or the background of it, or what it means.
So I can give like a 4-hour class on dissociation. So I'll give a brief overview. So when you've heard of fight or flight, right? So when you're in survival mode, you're going to either be hyper aroused or hypo aroused. Hypo aroused is the dissociation. Everybody dissociates. When you daydream, you're dissociating. When you drive home and don't remember every detail of the drive every time, you're dissociating. That's what you do. There's dissociative activities that people do just to kind of get away from, the daily rigmarole. Video games are highly dissociative. Reading is a dissociative activity. So when people when they get so dysregulated that they're done handling what's going on, they're going to dissociate and kind of fall into themselves. And then that's where the memory lapses come in, because you're not being present right now. Yeah.
Yep, very good. Thank you. And just real quick from the chat, he says, Scott says you don't want to admit some of those events, so you dissociate.
Mhm.
Very good. Well, that's great. Okay, I see another hand, Lana.
Hi, I have a question. Melissa, with all of your experience, with your military experience and the work that you do now, how has that affected you with your boundaries with people, friends and family? Because boundaries for me are huge. So I'm just curious.
Boundaries in what way?
So not in a way that they're looking for you to fix them, but just boundaries in general. I mean, are you more vigilant with them, or do you relax them a little bit more?
That's a good question. I mean, I think because of my childhood, I'm able to kind of separate myself from things. So I'm totally different in a therapy session than I am at home sitting on the couch with Daniel bullshitting about stupidity we see on the TV, right?
Right.
I don't talk about clients. I have family that say, hey, I need help with anxiety, or hey, can you help me? I mean, and then I'm like, nope, it's unethical. I can't see you. So, I mean, there's things like that. I don't think I have an issue with boundaries. Daniel, would you say otherwise?
Daniel has left the room. No, I don't think so. I think because of her background and her experience and her adult or early childhood and stuff, she handles herself or presents herself a certain way, and I don't think it changes very much from situations or with different people. Good question. Janet says she has another question.
Yeah, I just wanted to go back to the dissociation, because I found after I'd gone through what I went through, I realized that, and I'd like your take on it. I felt I disassociated from at work because I had to take myself out of the equation when working with an emergency. And so if I had stayed in associated, I would get too involved and too emotional, especially files with children. But it wasn't until after I went through my trauma, my diagnosis, that I realized how often I wasn't present. Now, can you speak to that? Because I would think that's what I was doing, was disassociating and separating myself from it.
Absolutely, I would agree. Yep. Because I know
Very
for
good.
me, working with children is difficult. As a social worker working in foster care, and then working with my agency here, doing the NMT assessments, we see the most complex trauma imaginable. So there's stuff that I've seen her dealt with that, I would never mention to anybody else. Because I don't want to word vomit on anybody, and then have that trauma, if it may be a triggering event for them, have that sit with them for any length of time. So I mean, I wish I could have dissociated from some of that stuff. But unfortunately, I wasn't able to do that. It's not a good thing to do, but in certain situations, your body's doing what it needs to do to survive and to handle what's going on. And that's one of the things that it does.
Yeah, I think I did it for years. I didn't even realize until I did my master in LP, timeline therapy and hypnotherapy. And then it just like was a light bulb came on that says, that's what I've been doing. So yeah, thank you for answering that.
Absolutely. And Scott says in the chat that it's not uncommon for folks to compartmentalize in that manner. And I think we all understand that in the moment, there are certain situations we're in where that's exactly what we do. And I can admit that I became an expert at compartmentalizing and never releasing any of that. Terry, you had a question?
I do, but Paul and Michelle were before me.
But they already asked.
Okay, so my question is, with all the years that you've been involved with therapy, counseling, and everything, what have you found for your own self-care that you feel has worked the best?
No.
I'm just joking.
So I haven't, okay. So I like to watch TV. It's like you utilize less brain cells watching TV than you do when you're sleeping. So for me, it's a huge distressor. When I get home, please don't judge me. So I have a favorite TV show that I like to watch, Jerry Springer. I'm sure you've heard of it. And not the older shows where he's just like talking to people, the ones where people are actually fighting. That's my entertainment.
Don't forget Maury.
Yeah, I watch Maury.
I'm a Maury fan.
So yes, you made me turn red. Good question.
Thank you for sharing.
Okay, Paul. You're muted, Paul. There you go.
We can let Michelle go first if she wants.
Michelle. He's quite the gentleman.
Thank you, Paul. Of course he is. That's why I love him. But I like that you pointed out the Jerry Springer thing, because my trash TV is like Teen Mom, and I hate to admit it, but it's too good Keeping Up with the Kardashians. Stop laughing, Daniel.
I'm sorry.
Me and my best friend, we were both dispatchers of the same department. We used to have our trash TV Wednesdays because that was our one common night off, and we would open some wine, have some popcorn, throw on face mask, and get caught up on our TV.
Yeah.
But my question for you is, as someone who I've spent 14 years being a first responder, as a 911 dispatcher, and then I'm dealing with PTSD, which has opened up the root of some abandonment issues that go back to childhood. That always uncovers that onion. But I love helping people. But workers' comp is about to finalize me to pull me out of dispatching. I can't go back anymore. So I was able to somehow, through all of this, at the beginning of this year, I graduated and completed my bachelor's in psychology. So I'm trying to figure out where to go next because you're right, you can't do anything with the bachelor's in psychology, but I want to be able to help in mental health, but I don't want to do social work. I want to do something, like something that involves our first responders, and make a difference there. And I know I'm going to have the opportunity for workers' comp to potentially pay for some schooling. Do you have a recommendation of what type of certificates or degrees I could look into?
I'm not sure about the state of Nevada. I don't know how they sparse their stuff out. Would you want to get or spend time getting a master's degree in counseling so you can move forward in that way? Or
That's what
mean,
I'm
you
kind
could-
of thinking after
okay,
hearing you talk about that, because someone had told me, oh, just get a master's in social work, you'll be able to do a bit of everything. And the more I talk to people like you and hearing Lana say the same thing, I'm like, I don't think that's what I want, because I don't want to go work with children. That's one of my triggers. So I really would not rather do that, but I don't want to waste the time either, so I do think counseling might be a good one to look into.
yeah, I would look and see what the schools have in your area that's affordable. But they may have a master's in psychology, a master's in counseling. If you're not into social work, then I wouldn't. It's a lot of social policy stuff and government programs and stuff like that you'd have. Yeah, it's
Yeah, it doesn't sound fun at all.
Yeah.
But I do
Um,
have, my bachelor's was from Bellevue out of Nebraska. I did their online stuff, and they do have an online master's for counseling. I'd have to
But
fly
you
out
need-
here.
but you need to check with your state to see what is licensable, because you may do a master's program, but your state doesn't recognize it, so you can't get licensed with that master's program.
Okay, so just make sure the school is licensed with the state that I'm living in.
Yes.
Okay, thank
Yeah.
you.
Great question. And Brianne and Lynette both talk about the therapeutic effects of essential oils to help with relaxing. And people are laughing at the shows that we watch, which is great.
Okay. So I do have a comment about the essential oils. I do recommend oils and lotions for people. And then there's people like me. I am allergic to everything. I can't put certain things on my body. I'm very sensitive to smells. So I do keep lotions in my office and, let my clients know that they can use it. I do have an orange one. I'm actually going to remove it from my office. It smells good, but it's so strong, it actually makes me nauseous. So there's different things that, that people may want to try. Essential oils are good.
Absolutely. All right, Paul, we're going to round it out here.
I want to start by acknowledging and thanking you for your vulnerability and your candor today, Melissa.
Absolutely.
And the second thing I want to say before I get too far away is none of us are perfect. And I think most of the people here recognize that, but there are a whole lot of folks who don't, or just refuse to, and we call them narcissistic personalities or whatever, but and they are perfect. And if you don't believe it, you can just ask them. As to self-care, I will tell you that that Scott lives in one of the most beautiful valleys in the entire Southern California area, and they grow grapes there. And guess what they do with the grapes?
They eat them?
Yeah, well, if they get to them before the other guys do. Anyway, I truly appreciate what you have shared with us today. And I
Nice.
think this is an interesting model of interview because your husband and you are doing this pretty much together. And we had an incident yesterday where a police officer had literally turned around the life of a young boy. And we now, I'm going to try to identify and locate that young man and put him back together with this officer so they can sit and chat either by phone or, because I have no idea where the kid is. And by the way, he's not a kid anymore. He's in college or perhaps past college. But I think that is another example of what could be a really valuable conversation, because you get two sides of the story. Here was a police officer who was just going through brutality internally, and a young boy whose mother dropped him off at the front desk of the police station and said, "You may have him, do whatever you want with him. I don't want him back because he hits people. He hits me. He hits his brothers and sisters." And this officer had the wherewithal to take him into a room, get right in his face and say, "Go ahead, hit me." And that moment turned that kid's life around, because he started crying. And it turned out what he really wanted was just simply to be heard.
Mhm.
And so that's part of the value of having the two of you together today, because you each have insights into the other just as much as my wife and I have insights to each other. And I think there's tremendous value in that. And so I thank you truly for being willing to share. And I know that you have limitations on what you can share, and I understand that, but that's fine. We want to know about you, the lovely wife. And hopefully you're not allergic to Daniel.
Not yet. You get,
Hey,
it may come about in later years. We'll see.
all right, that's enough of that.
Anyway, thank you very much.
Thank you, Paul. Brand says she loves Sonoma County, California, aka wine country, and she thanks us. She says we're kind of cool in that way. Yeah, we
Hey,
live
Daniel,
up in. Where do
I'd
we
like to
live?
jump in if I can, Daniel.
Oh,
real
absolutely,
quick.
sir. Good to see you. Haven't
Yeah,
seen
cool.
you in a while.
Yeah, it's been a while. I just wanted to say thank you to Melissa. The things that she is talking about matter, and it's good to have a professional come on and discuss these things and delve into these topics. And the other thing is, dude, watching you do what you're doing here is inspiring me. You're doing a great job, hosting and guiding along the discussion, keeping folks in on what's being said in the chat. it seems like you've done this before. I don't know, you're good at it. So I wanted to give you a nod for that as well. And then one of the things that we were talking about, Janet talked about, the compartmentalization. I mean, there's ways to look at that. I think it's absolutely essential in some jobs, because if you can't do that, you're not going to get through the moment. Now, how many times you do that, what you're doing it about, how it impacts you over time, that's really where you have to start, having to come to Jesus meeting with yourself and realize, okay, I know that this has happened. Is that what's affected me? And then do something about it, right? We always talk about things, but the action piece sometimes doesn't come, because we may feel momentarily better and think, oh, I'm good. And then something happens, right? So finding that right person, as we talked about, it's critical. I'll share with you real quick, when my folks split up, and I was in 5th grade, my mom felt it was important that my brother and I go see a counselor, a psychiatrist, a counselor. And I was in like 5th grade. So I guess about 11 or 12. This guy was bat crap crazy. I mean, he really was. He was sitting there popping pills as he's talking to me and my brother. And the guy out the front door was wearing very revealing, I mean, just, like, I don't know, without getting into that, it was a weird situation. Fast forward, I told my mom, I don't want to do this. I'm not comfortable with this guy. I mean, I was a kid and I saw that it wasn't right. Fast forward, at some point, that guy was upset because his son got in trouble at school. And instead of, rationalizing with the administrators, he got a mallet, went into the bathroom and broke every urinal on the wall and the toilets. Now, and this guy's a professional. I mean, we all have problems, right? But some folks shouldn't be in the profession, and there needs to be,
Right.
A little better overhead for, who's in and who's not. So, yeah, that was my introduction to that world. But I've since matured in my belief and feeling about that. And so, finding that right person matters. But hey, thanks, you guys.
Absolutely. All right. So we're going to bring it back to that question that I had asked. Have you experienced any unusual or weird events during a counseling session to close it out?
So he's bringing this up because I had an incident on Wednesday. Sometimes when people don't want to discuss something, they'll have a psychosomatic reaction to it. So they'll experience it physically. I don't want to give too much detail, but when this young lady came into my office, she always wears, it's hell hot in Phoenix, Arizona in the summertime. Okay. So when I notice any adolescent wearing sweaters, long sleeve sweaters, pants all the time, I know why. Her sweater fell off of her arm, so I noticed fresh cuts. So I asked her, straight up, hey, I noticed the cuts on your arm. What's going on? So we're talking for 2 minutes. She asked for a minute. I say, no problem, and then she's like, I know the hand and arm signals for I'm about to get sick. So I let her know where the trash is. Not thinking she would, just thinking she was, being a little dramatic. No, she did. So she walked over to the trash can, projectile vomited right in my trash. I got up, held her hair back.
That's a good friend, right? Well, not your friend, therapist. That's a good therapist right there.
Gave her the option to continue on or cut the session short. She said, no, we can continue. We continued mission. I made her clean what was on the wall because I made her clean that up herself because I'm not her mom. That's her stuff. She can do it.
But you had a mom reaction.
Oh, well, yeah. But yeah, and then we continued mission and it was great. First time that's ever happened to me. Hopefully last time that's ever happened to me. Funny side note, she just got done drinking like a fruity drink. So the vomit smelled like fruit instead of like nastiness. You know,
All right,
I let her
so-
know at least it smelled fruity, you know, and she's laughing as she's wiping up. Yeah. So it was interesting. She's a
Absolutely.
great kid. She's a great
That's a
kid.
great story. And I think we'll wrap it up with that, with the fruity vomit. But I do have a challenge coin here from my American Legion Post 34, our 75th anniversary challenge coin. And Sarah, I believe, is going to draw somebody's name, and they will be the proud recipient of a Post 34 American Legion 75th anniversary challenge coin.
Cool. So I'm going to go and cut the recording unless there's any last words. Okay, good, Daniel.
Yes.
All right.